Here. Just gonna go ahead and get started. Let's start with a prayer, please. Oh, Father God, we thank you for allowing us to be here on this morning. We thank you for the beautiful weather. We ask you to be with us during this Bible study on this morning on the life of Joseph as we continue on. Thank you for his example that you left the words in the Bible for us. Bless our worship service on this morning. Bless those ones that are still en route. We thank you so much for our life, and we pray this prayer in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
So where we last left Joseph, he was appointed as a vizier for over the land of Egypt. We know that he had chosen this path, or God had chosen this path for him, but he accepted this path, which is quite amazing, you know, all the things that he had been through. So I believe this is our last Sunday going through the book of Genesis with the chapters that kind of reflect on Joseph. Again, quite astonishing that all these books are dedicated to one individual that is kind of an unsung hero, you know, not, again, one that's known for praying and things of that nature, but just kind of being that example for us as Christians. So we're going to try our best to get through Genesis 42 through 50, which is quite a lot, but obviously we're not going to read every word of it, but we're going to go through some highlighted portions here and kind of get going here. So in Genesis 42, we know this is where Joseph's brothers, they come to Egypt, but we're going to read a little bit here. And like I've done before, I'm going to kind of switch a little bit back and forth with the King James Version. The only reason why is because some of the King James Version kind of highlights some of the wording just a little bit differently, but we'll make sure we stay in tune there. So in Genesis chapter 42 and verse 1, it says, when Jacob learned that there was grain in Egypt, he said to his sons, why do you just keep looking at each other? You know, so I'm believing that he found out that there was corn or grain in the land of Egypt from his neighbors. So he turns to his sons and he basically said, you know, why are you looking at one another? You know, we got to figure out what we're going to do. You know, it is I mean, I don't know if you've ever been hungry, and I'm not talking about after services on Sunday. I'm talking about like truly hungry where you are like in need of a meal. And this is what they were facing. So, you know, some hard decisions and things had to take place. He continues and says, I have learned that there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us so that we may live and not die. So this is a life and death situation because the famine now has been going on for, we believe, about 1 or 2 years. So, people have reserves, but those reserves only go so far. So now his sons have to travel, to Egypt from Canaan. And from looking at it, some of you may have been in the Middle East, and I'm not sure what it's actually called right now, but during that day, the journey was about 200 miles. So this wasn't like, this go down in the afternoon, come back type thing. This was like a 10-day one-way journey. So it takes a while to get down there. You got to take camels and herdsmen and all these things, because if you're going to go down and get corn and grain, you're not just going to go down and get enough. It's not like you're going down to the Walmart and you get enough for 1 week or 2 weeks. You got to get enough for like maybe a year or more, because this is a pretty big trip. And his 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain from Egypt, but Jacob did not send Benjamin. I wonder why. Maybe, something happened to Joseph, so maybe he decided, I'm not going to send Benjamin. Yes, sir.
Well, traveling was not like it is today. I mean, there's an element of danger in it. It's not like you call up the highway patrol, it's
The highway patrol.
You ever come into some bandits or anything like that. So there is an element of danger in traveling this far.
Yes.
Well, it sounds to me like Jacob didn't learn his lesson with Joseph. This was the other son by his favorite wife. And he showed partiality again.
Yeah, he didn't want Benjamin to go down because, and I love the word that, the King James Version, it says, peradventure, mischief befalls him. Peradventure, it's like perhaps, possibly, something like that. But the NIV just kind of says, but Jacob did not want to send Benjamin, Joseph's brother, with the others because he was afraid that harm might come to him. Which, I mean, he had a legitimate concern. The last time he sent one of his youngest sons out, they came back with some bloody, torn up clothes. So as a father, I would kind of be a little concerned too. So Israel's sons were among those who went down to buy grain, for there was famine in the land of Canaan also. So let's go down to skip verse 6, we go to verse 7. Now it says, as soon as Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them. And why do you think they didn't recognize him? I mean, how many years had kind of passed? No,
Not a kid anymore.
Yep. He was 17 years old when they put him in the pit. He was 30 years old when Pharaoh appointed him as, his second in command.
And also he was in high position. They could not believe that was Joseph.
Right. Yes.
Well, he would have been dressed differently.
Dressed
They
differently.
would have probably dressed the exact same way. He would have been dressed totally differently.
So he probably didn't have the same Hebrew outfits, or he was in rags, or, and also, we're estimating about 20 to 22 years had passed. So, he probably looked a little different, sounded different, so they did not recognize him, but he immediately, recognized them. But he pretended to be a stranger and spoke harshly to them. Where do you come from? He asked. From the land of Canaan, they replied, to buy food. Although Joseph recognized his brothers, he did not recognize him. Then he remembered his dream about them and said to them, you are spies. You have come to see where our land is unprotected. They said, no, my Lord, they answered, your servants have come to buy food. So I think we kind of talked about this a little bit last week, and Irvin really expounded on it. It's not that he wants to play like a game of checkers or chess with them. He's really trying to understand their heart. He's just trying to, he's asking them open-ended questions, like, how's your father? And different things. And they're really just kind of opening up to him and telling him all the things that's taking place. Let's say here in verse 11 it says, we are all one man's sons. We are true men. The servants are no spies. They say they're true men. What does true man mean?
Honest.
Honest. It's kind of an old way of saying it, but I say, I'm a true man. Like, what are you talking about? I'm honest. And they're saying they're honest. They're the sons of one father. And they go on and say, it was, 12 of us, 11 of us, and then one, is not anymore.
That on a side note here, Rolando, that is an example of how language changes. Because today, if you say I'm a true man, you mean you're like, you got muscles, you're manly.
Yeah.
That's what that's gonna mean today.
Yeah.
And back then, you're honest. So anyway.
Yeah, terms change, and as you read like different versions of the Bible, sometimes you got to Google like, okay, what does peradventure mean? What does this mean? It's just different terms have changed, like Troy said, over the years. So they kind of go back and forth with him, but basically, they get some coin and he kind of sends them on their way. So we're going to go on to chapter 43 and kind of go in there a little bit. So in chapter 43, it goes on, this is the second journey to Egypt here. Now here it is. Now the famine was still severe in the land. So when they had eaten all of the grain they had brought from Egypt, the father said to them, go back and buy us a little more food. But what did Joseph say to them in chapter 42 if they came back? What did they have to do?
Bring Benjamin.
Bring Benjamin. You got to bring a younger brother. That was one of the stipulations. And what did he also do?
Kept Simeon.
Kept Simeon. I don't know how Simeon was chosen, but he kept Simeon, and I'm sure he treated him well. I often wonder, what kind of conversations or I don't know, different things, maybe what took place or whatever, but Simeon was basically, kept as like a bond for them to come back, and Benjamin was their surety to come back and also be able to bow again. So, I mean, Joseph is kind of doing a lot with them, versus just give them some grain and say, hey, it's me, Joseph, I'm the guy, you threw in the pit a long time ago, but, he's kind of testing their heart. And I think this is a great example of sometimes I think God kind of tests our heart. He put things on us sometimes that we may not be aware of at different stages in our life. And we kind of wonder, why is this happening? But, it's all for a purpose. That purpose could be to make us stronger. Purpose could be to make us more patient. Purpose could be making us just wait for something that we may not be ready for at that period of time. So we're going to skip down to verse 29 here. And this is where we know that Jacob kind of protested Benjamin going to the land of Egypt because he didn't want, harm to fall on him. But what does Judah do? And this is kind of interesting how this all transpires. It's almost like Reuben is the firstborn, but it's almost like from chapter 43 to 50, it's almost like Reuben just kind of disappears. I mean, you don't really hear words from the firstborn. It's kind of like this is almost like Judah and Joseph's story kind of comes out. So Judah stands up and he tells his father that, we'll go back to Egypt, but, you got to send Benjamin. But if you send Benjamin, I'll become surety for him. So in other words, if something happens to Benjamin, I am 100% accountable. So in verse 29, as he looked about, he saw his brother Benjamin, his own mother's son, and he asked, is this your younger brother, which he knew, the one you told me about? And he said, God be gracious to you, my son. Deeply moved at the sight of his brother, Joseph hurried out and looked for a place to weep. He went into his private room and wept there. I mean, he was so emotionally touched from seeing Benjamin. And, it's that bond that I'm sure they had as, the only brothers of the same mother, the full brothers. And for him to be able to lay his eyes on him after all these years, it was, I'm sure, a very emotional experience for him. It's not that saying his other brothers wasn't, a great emotional experience, but, it's just something about, seeing Benjamin. And also the fact that they brought him, because, he didn't know what they were going to do. He knew they had to eat, but they could have came back and perhaps with some type of excuse or whatever the case may have been, but they did. After he had washed his face, he came out controlling himself and said, serve food. What's so special about those verses, though, you think? You see anything special? It is, you have the reuniting of two brothers who haven't seen one another in a very, very long time. And also, if you kind of recall here, this is where, and this hasn't happened that I know of with any of the reading, they all sit down and they have a meal. Now, of course, Joseph being in his position, he eats by himself. The Egyptians eat by themselves. And the brothers eat by themselves, but they're all eating a meal at the same time. But what order are they sitting in?
Age.
They're all sitting at age, from Reuben all the way to Benjamin. They're all sitting down by age. And they kind of marveled at one another because they kind of felt at peace. It was kind of a total different experience than what they thought they were going to come back to. And this was an opportunity for them to kind of just enjoy for once this fellowship with one another, because when he invited them to the house, what they originally think?
They were gonna get killed.
Yeah.
From
I mean, for one, we know that their money was returned to him. You know, they didn't trust him 100%. They didn't know what was going on here. So they're thinking that he's about to probably, take an opportunity to enslave them or kill them or something. But instead, he sits down and have a proper meal with them. He treats them with kindness, treat them with dignity, and they have a great meal. So in Genesis 44, this is where it gets very interesting. And you can kind of look at from Genesis 42 and 43, it's almost like the climax of this is 44. This is where he sits up and we're going to kind of read through this. But this is where Joseph basically kind of does something kind of scrupulous to his brothers. He sends them off, but let's go ahead and do a little read. And he commanded the steward of his house, saying, fill the men's sacks with food as much as they can carry, and put every man's money in his sack's mouth. So he's not taking the money. And put my cup, the silver cup, in the sack's mouth of the youngest, in his corn money. And he did according to the word that Joseph had spoken. So why does he do this? I mean, he wants to put this silver cup in the youngest sack, and the youngest is Benjamin. Why does he do this?
Got a plan.
So you got a plan? We're going to see it unfold. Okay, as soon as the morning was light, the men were sent away, there in their donkeys, and when they were gone out of the city and not yet far off, Joseph said unto his steward, up, follow after the men, and when thou dost overtake them, say to them, wherefore have ye rewarded evil for good? Is not this it in which my Lord drinketh, and whereby indeed yet he have done evil in so doing? So he sends his steward after them to overtake them to find this silver cup back, and he accuses them of stealing it. Why does he do this?
Joseph told him to.
Yeah, told him to. But, he has his plan. He wants to really see their heart. He wants to see where they are at. You remember, now, Reuben was the only one that spoke up when Joseph was basically, thrown into this pit, don't kill him. And then Judah said, instead of killing him, let's sell him. So now Benjamin is found with this silver cup, and he wants to see how his brothers respond.
With Joseph, they hated so much because of the preferential treatment he was receiving that they wanted to get rid of him. And they didn't care, what, their father felt. They didn't care about anything except for themselves and what they wanted. They wanted to get rid of him because of envy, because of everything. And now it's like they care about how their father feels. They care that their father's going to be devastated and like he's in the grave, like they've already killed him. And they're also, it's like they find a little bit of humility and a little bit of regret when it comes to Benjamin, because they don't want to get rid of him, even though he was probably being treated the same way Joseph was by his father. He was probably getting all this preferential treatment at the time, but the brothers concerned about him. I think it was mainly because of the father, but they did have some regret and didn't want that to happen again.
Yeah. I think that's so well put. I don't think you could put it any better. I mean, now they have the opportunity to basically show their true hearts. I mean, are they going to stand up for Benjamin, or are they just going to let what happened to Joseph, It's like a repeat of history.
Yeah, and this plan of Joseph helped show that.
Yeah.
And this is kind of talked about this maybe last week or the week before. This is where all the times, the years you kind of read through the Bible, and if you kind of gloss over this, you just think, okay, Joseph just kind of, being kind of mean. He could have told him earlier, but it's a master divine plan in the midst of all this, he's trying to, in his own discernment, figure out how their heart, change, and that's kind of, like us, sometimes our heart can be hard when it comes to certain situations, but, it can be softened with certain situations or things that come our way.
Isn't it the same temptation that he last saw his brothers, before he was sold into slavery? I mean, that was their biggest temptation. Well, do we kill him or, oh, wait a minute, we can get a little money out of this. So Joseph is turning it on them and, they could take the money and head on back home, never hear from them again. All right, I know where their heart is, but you're right. It's a good test.
So let's go down a little bit further. So in verse 14, it says, and Judah and his brothers came to Joseph's house, for he was yet there, and they fell before him on the ground. And Joseph said unto them, what deed is this that ye have done? Woe ye, not that such a man as I can certainly divine. And Judah said, what shall we say unto my Lord? What shall we speak? Or how shall we clear ourselves? So it's really like Judah is the one that's doing all of the now talking. And it's almost like Judah is like this, because Judah's in the line, of Christ, and it's almost like he's basically being this spokesperson, the transgression. He's accusing them of a transgression of stealing, but yet Judah stands up in place of them and basically say that, hey, instead of taking him, he's begging him not to, keep Benjamin in slavery, which is something different than what the situation was with Joseph. So when Joseph hears all this, what does he do? He finally he breaks down in an emotional cry. And he realizes that, his brothers have truly changed. And he recognizes that, they have not the same heart as they had before. And now this is an opportunity. He believes in his mind that they are changed men. So as we begin, verse 45, Joseph comes straight out. And he says, and Joseph could no longer control himself before all his attendants. He cried out, have every person leave my presence. So there was no one with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers. And he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard him, and Pharaoh's household heard about it. Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph, is my father still living? But his brothers were not able to answer him because they were terrified in his presence. I mean, can you imagine that? They really thought he was dead. They thought he probably died in slavery or, through a hard labor. And yet, he's the guy who's been kind of going back and forth. They bought some grain and he's kept Simeon. He wanted Benjamin and now the cup thing. And now he's telling them that he is Joseph. This is, an emotional time for all of them. But he comforts them. He puts them at ease. But, they still are just in awe of this whole situation. In verse 25, it says, so they went out of Egypt and came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan. They told him Joseph is still alive. In fact, he is ruler over all Egypt. Jacob was stunned. He did not believe them. This is where the King James Version says Jacob fainted. He was just, he just could not take the news that they told him. And all this studying through all these books, it never says that Jacob knew truly what they did. But I'm sure he suspected something one thing about it, we realize that the dream, that dream that Joseph had 22 years ago of them coming and bowing before him, that dream came true. We also realize that, when he had that second dream about, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars bowing before him, and it says that, Jacob kept it in mind. So I think Jacob kind of believed that this could be possible. He didn't know how or when or where, but he knew that somehow, Joseph was going to be that special blessing for his family. So after he fainted and got back up, but when they told him everything Joseph had said to them, and when they saw the carts Joseph had sent to carry him back, the spirit of their father, Jacob, revived. It's like new life. Imagine if you have a grandbaby or a new baby and, they're out of town and you kind of feel tired, you kind of feel weak, your health is not the greatest, but you want to see this child. And that's what Jacob wanted. Jacob wanted in his life, he says, before he dies, he wanted to see Joseph. That's all he wanted to do. And as I read that, I was kind of thinking, if I was one of the other brothers, I'm like, what about me? But, I was just thinking that just for a second but he wanted to go to Egypt. He wanted to see Joseph before he dies. So this is kind of his last dying desires. So in chapter 46, so Israel set out with all of his, and when he reached Beersheba, he offered sacrifice to the God of his father Isaac. And God spoke to Israel in a vision at night and said to him, Jacob, Jacob, here I am. He replied, I am God, the God of your father. He said, do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will make you into a great nation there. I will go down to Egypt with you, and I will surely bring you back again. What does it mean by bring you back again?
Out of Egypt. Back out of Egypt.
Back out of Egypt. The bones, you're not gonna be put to rest there.
I think it could be possibly taken two different ways. One, his bones were taken back after he died, but also the people of Israel ended up 400 years later, ended up coming back out of Egypt.
There's a lot of things that, and that's the most amazing part about it. You got Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Then you got Reuben as the firstborn. You got Leah, and all this. And Rachel was the second wife. But it's almost like the story in Genesis is almost Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, and Judah. Those are like the really key characters. Obviously before Abraham was all these other people, But he tells Jacob also, in Joseph's own hands will close your eyes. Meaning that when he dies, Joseph's gonna be the one there to close your eyes. And this is one of the parts I really got to kind of read a little bit slower in Genesis 46, because I really, as I read through the Bible, for me, I don't think I've ever found such a wonderful, you got Abraham when he went to sacrifice Isaac, and obviously God provided Jehovah Rapha, Jehovah Jireh, God will provide. But that's a beautiful story of a father and son. But when you have this reunion between, Joseph and Jacob, it's one of the most beautiful stories in the Bible, In verse 28, it says, and he sent Judah before him unto Joseph to direct his face unto Goshen. They came into the land of Goshen, and Joseph made ready his chariot. So Joseph made ready his own power and look and grace and all the things he had, and went up to meet his father in Goshen and presented himself unto him. Now, Joseph, is like the second in command. And of course, Jacob is one of the servants of the outreaching lands, pretty much. But this is where, Joseph shows, his humility, his love, his respect, his humbleness for his father, not, any envy, not any hate thinking, no type of spite. He presents himself to his father where the situation could have been worse. He could have been not the man that he was, and he could have came in a not humble way and expected for his father to greet him in a royal manner as his brothers have done countless times as they've encountered him. So he presented himself to his father, and he fell on his neck and wept on his neck a good while. Now, I don't know what a good while is, but I'm sure that he was happy to see his father, because one thing you won't miss in this whole reading and his studies is Joseph truly loved his father. His father really loved him. I think we know that clearly. And Israel said to Joseph, "Now let me die, since I have seen thy face, because thou art yet alive." And Joseph said unto his brothers and to his father's house, "I will go and show Pharaoh, and say unto him, in my father's house, which were in the land of Canaan, are come to thee." I don't think it could be any more beautiful than that. One thing about it, the employment that Jacob and all his sons had, they were shepherds. And this was an abomination to the Egyptians. They did not look kindly on this. But when he went to Pharaoh, what did he tell them that they were?
Shepherds.
Shepherds. He didn't lie. He didn't look at it as a disgraceful trade or skill or employment they had. And Pharaoh accepted that and gave them a great place to live and things of that nature. Genesis 47 is really all about Joseph kind of going forth and just kind of handling the famine there. But also, this is where we see that Israel is about to sit down, and he's about to bless, all of his sons going into Genesis 48. Now, this is the most interesting thing when Jacob gets ready to bless, first of all, Joseph's sons. Who did he wants to bless first? The younger son. For whatever reason, he says that Ephraim is going to actually be higher, more stronger than Manasseh. So he wants to bless Ephraim. And it seems like if you look through the things that Jacob has done throughout, when he was born, and his mother, Rebecca, he had his brother Esau. What did he do with Esau? He had him to
Birthright.
Yeah, he stole his birthright. He was a younger, So it's something that, Jacob, he's always, for some reason, favored the younger son, kind of going against the tradition of the older son being the more blessed, Now, before Jacob dies, and that happens in Genesis 49, he goes through and he blesses all of his sons. And he talks about their different strengths and things of that nature. Talks about, of course, Reuben being his firstborn, his might. He talks about Simeon and Levi. And of course, we said Levi, this is within the tribe of Moses and Aaron. And he talks about, Judah. And he says, of course, we know Judah is the Lion of Judah. He talks about the scepter shall not depart from Judah, which of course we know that's Jesus. But when he gets to Joseph, he spends a lot longer time. He talks about Joseph is a fruitful bough, and even fruitful bough by a well, whose branches run over the well. The archers have sorely grieved him. Talking about the grief that Joseph went through, and shot at him and hated him. But his bow abode in strength, and the arms of his hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty God of Jacob. Even by God, thou Father, who shall help thee, and by the Almighty, who shall bless thee with blessings of heaven above, blessings of deep that layeth under, blessing of the breast and of the womb. So he goes on, and he talks about, Jacob, and he really he talks about Joseph, and as he really kind of talks about it, you kind of realize, in Psalms and also in Matthew, it talks about, the chief cornerstone, meaning, the builders, this is the stone that the builders rejected. And, the cornerstone, just like in this corner right here, you got to put that cornerstone there because everything else is built up from it. It's the foundation. And if you think about, in this case, Joseph was that stone of Israel because he was sold into slavery and became who he was through God's divine plan. Now he's the foundation for his family to live. But he was rejected by his brothers, but now he's become the chief cornerstone, which is amazing. He talks about Benjamin, of course, this is where, Paul comes from. And then Jacob, of course, he talks about where he wants to be buried at. This is where Abraham and Sarah is buried. This is where Isaac and Rebekah is buried. This is where Leah is buried. Even though he loved Rachel, Leah was his first wife, and, Rachel died on the journey. So he talks about the field that he had bought. And also he talks about, something that he left to Joseph only. Now in Genesis 50, of course, this is where Jacob has basically died. And Joseph fell upon his father's face and wept upon him and kissed him. And Joseph commanded his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father. And this is where I believe, it was interpreted that God said that Joseph would be the one that closed his eyes. And they mourned for him 40 days. But how many days did the Egyptians mourn for him? 70 days. He wasn't an Egyptian, but, you think about sometimes, the funerals that we've had as people, and you think about when Abraham died, when Isaac died, it wasn't this pomp and fare, but when Jacob died, because of who Joseph was and where he was, this was a huge deal. When they went to Jacob's funeral, all the elders of Egypt went. It wasn't an Egyptian. But afterwards, and this is where we kind of get to kind of the last part, and I know this has been kind of like a lightning speed, I know. But the point of the lesson here is, in Genesis 50, when Jacob's sons realized that that he was dead, now they started being fearful. It was like, wait a minute, he's gone. And I think the only reason why he hasn't taken revenge on us is probably because of the old man, And it's interesting that Jacob had Joseph for 17 years, and then he was placed in slavery. When he got to Egypt, he was 130 years old, and he died at 147. So he had 17 more years with Joseph, kind of all he had. But I think we got like 5 minutes. I'm going to try to read kind of quickly here. But when Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, what if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pay us back for all the wrong we have done to him? And I'm going to skip down to verse 19 for the sake of time. But Joseph said to them, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. And I think when Joseph says, am I in the place of God? He's really saying a lot to them. He's saying that it's not my place to judge you. It's not my place to forgive you. I've done that. You have to forgive yourself and you have to take that up with God. God did unto me what he did. And now I'm in this place able to help people. Now it's up to you. You have to basically forgive yourself and take that matter up with God yourself. I'm here where I am. And he treated them kindly. He also gave them the prophesies. He said, basically, when I die, take my bones, carry my bones out. So he knew that it would come a time that they would have to do exodus. And of course, we know when Moses left, it's kind of visualized this, they kind of swam back and came through the coffin and grabbed Joseph's bones and went off and they buried him, But he knew that, there was going to come a time where they were going to have to leave that land, where they were going to become too prosperous and all that, and the Egyptians were going to be envious of them. And it's, again, like I said earlier, it's amazing that, Joseph was a type of a prophet in a way. But I really hope you kind of enjoy this. Obviously 4 weeks to really dig into this is a big tasking, but I really think hopefully you enjoyed this. I'll be talking with Mike Bennett this week. I think I'll be like John, crying out in the wilderness. Someone is coming before me that's going to be way better. And they're going to give you some great lessons. So looking forward to that taking place. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, Tom. Good to see you, brother.
You feel good about it.
Here's Tom Green on the screen.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go back to the car and get